The knitting detective, Margaret Peggy Thompson, wasn't your typical 72-year-old grandmother. While other ladies her age were hosting book clubs and baking cookies, Peggy was piecing together clues from her rocking chair on the porch of her Victorian home in small-town Maine. Her reputation as the knitting detective had spread far beyond their sleepy coastal community of Seabrook Harbor. "Another one disappeared last night, Charlie," Peggy said to her orange tabby cat, adjusting her reading glasses as she scanned the local newspaper. 3 women had vanished in the past month, all from the newly developed Marina district. The police were baffled, but Peggy saw patterns where others saw coincidence. Her grandson, Tommy, a rookie cop, had learned to take his grandmother's hunches seriously. "What's on your mind, Gran?" he asked, stopping by with her favorite blueberry muffins from the local bakery. "These disappearances?" Peggy replied, her knitting needles clicking steadily. "Have you noticed they all happened on nights with private events at the new yacht club?" Tommy frowned. "How did you know about the private events?" "Oh, honey," Peggy chuckled. "Mrs. Henderson from my bridge club is on the cleaning staff there. She notices things, just like I do." The police had been focused on local suspects, but Peggy's instincts told her otherwise. She'd lived in Seabrook Harbor for 50 years, watched it grow from a fishing village to a tourist destination. The changes brought money, but they also brought strangers. That evening, Peggy sat in her usual spot on the porch, knitting what appeared to be a complex sweater pattern. In reality, she was documenting the comings and goings at the marina. Her arthritis might slow her down, but her mind was sharp as ever. "Look there, Charlie," she whispered to her cat. A sleek black SUV with out-of-state plates was making its 3rd pass of the day. The driver wore dark sunglasses despite the setting sun. Peggy reached for her cell phone, a gift from Tommy who insisted she carry it, and snapped a picture. The license plate was partially visible. The next morning, she joined her friends for their weekly coffee at the seaside diner. Between bites of toast and sips of coffee, she gathered intelligence that would make the FBI envious. "Did you hear about that fancy new security company working at the yacht club?" Betty Wilson leaned in, lowering her voice. "My nephew works maintenance there. Says they're awful secretive." Peggy's ears perked up. "Security company? When did they start?" "Right before the first disappearance," Betty replied. "Out-of-state outfit, real professional types." That afternoon, Peggy called Tommy. "Dear, could you look up something for your old grandmother? A company called Elite Maritime Security. Something doesn't feel right." Tommy had learned to trust those feelings. 2 days later, he was standing in Peggy's kitchen, looking pale. "Gran, how did you know? They're not a real security company. The FBI's been tracking them up and down the East Coast. They're suspected of human trafficking using private yacht clubs as cover." Peggy nodded, her knitting needles never stopping. "The car I photographed? The driver matches the description of their suspected ringleader. Been watching him case the neighborhood all week." "We need to move fast," Tommy said, reaching for his phone. "The yacht club's hosting another event tonight." "Already ahead of you, dear." Peggy smiled. "Mrs. Henderson switched shifts to work tonight. She'll call me if she sees anything suspicious, and I've got Betty's nephew watching the docks." The sting operation went down that night. The FBI had been building a case for months, but Peggy's evidence, her photographs, detailed notes disguised as knitting patterns, and the network of observations from her friends provided the final pieces they needed. 5 people were arrested, including the man in the SUV. More importantly, they found the missing women alive, held on a yacht that was preparing to leave the harbor that night. A week later, the local paper ran a front-page story. Grandmother's sleuthing breaks up trafficking ring. The photo showed Peggy in her rocking chair, knitting needles in hand, with Charlie the cat perched beside her. "Just doing my civic duty," she told reporters, a twinkle in her eye. "An old lady sees things others might miss. We've been here longer, you know. We know when something's not right." That evening, Tommy brought over a celebratory pie. "The FBI agent in charge wants to consult with you on other cases, Gran. Says your observational skills are extraordinary." Peggy smiled, reaching for her knitting. "Tell him I'm happy to help, but I do my best work from this porch, with my cat and my knitting needles." She paused, looking out over the harbor where boats bobbed gently in the evening light. "You know, Tommy, evil doesn't expect to be noticed by little old ladies. That's what makes us so dangerous." Charlie purred in agreement, and Peggy began another row of stitches. To anyone passing by, she was just another grandmother enjoying the evening air, but her sharp eyes missed nothing, and her knitting journal held more secrets than anyone suspected. The legend of the knitting detective grew, and soon other coastal towns started reporting that their own grandmothers had taken up knitting on their porches, watching and waiting. Sometimes the best defense against darkness is a group of elderly ladies armed with sharp minds, sharper needles, and the wisdom to know that evil often hides in plain sight. After the Marina case, Peggy's quiet life changed subtly. While she still spent most days in her rocking chair with Charlie, she started teaching other seniors in the community about staying alert and protecting their neighborhoods. "It's not about being nosy," she told her Tuesday afternoon group, all gathered in her living room with teacups and knitting needles. "It's about knowing your community well enough to spot when something's wrong." She established what she called the Knitting Network, a group of seniors who shared information about suspicious activities while appearing to discuss patterns and stitches. They had a special code worked into their knitting patterns. Different stitches meant different types of suspicious activity. The local police department, led by Tommy, started consulting with the Knitting Network regularly. They helped solve cases ranging from petty theft to contractor fraud targeting the elderly. Peggy always insisted that their successes be kept quiet. "We're more effective if people underestimate us," she'd say with a wink. One morning, as she sat watching the sunrise over the harbor, Tommy brought her a special gift, a beautiful silver pendant in the shape of a magnifying glass. "From the department," he said, "though we can't officially acknowledge our secret weapon." Peggy smiled, pinning it to her sweater. "The best secrets," she said, picking up her knitting needles, "are the ones hidden in plain sight, just like the best detectives." Charlie stretched in the morning sun, and Peggy began another day of watching, waiting, and protecting her beloved town, one stitch at a time.